Hello everyone. Tonight we're going on a journey that has puzzled explorers and scientists for over 2,000 years. Imagine a magnificent civilization, rich, advanced and peaceful, suddenly swallowed by the ocean in a single day and night. What if it wasn't just a myth? So set your pillow and blanket, relax your mind, and get ready to dive into the mysterious legend of Atlantis, the lost civilization. Before we start, if you genuinely enjoy my work, please like and subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're from and what time you're watching this video. More than 2,000 years ago, a man named Plato sat down and wrote about a mysterious civilization, a place unlike anything people had seen or imagined before. He called it Atlantis, a mighty and powerful island nation that once ruled the seas. It had grand temples, golden statues, wide canals, and an army unmatched in size and strength. But in one single day and night, the entire civilization disappeared beneath the waves, lost forever. But was it ever real? Plato was a Greek philosopher, one of the most famous thinkers in human history. He lived around 400 years before Christ, in ancient Athens, a time when stories were passed from teacher to student, from mouth to ear like sacred treasures. Much of what we know today about philosophy, politics, and the soul began with thinkers like him. But when Plato told the story of Atlantis, he wasn't writing philosophy. He was writing something that felt more like a legend, or perhaps something he believed was once true. The tale of Atlantis appears in two of Plato's dialogues, writings called Timaeus and Critias. These were not ordinary books. They were structured as conversations between wise men. In them, Plato's characters discuss the nature of the universe, the soul, and the perfect city. And in the middle of these deep discussions, the story of Atlantis emerges, suddenly, as if it were dropped into the conversation like a forgotten memory. According to Plato, Atlantis existed 9,000 years before his time. That would place it roughly around 11,000 years ago, deep in the distant past. He said Atlantis was larger than Libya and Asia combined, a massive island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, which we now know as the Strait of Gibraltar. It was ruled by powerful kings, and its people were descendants of the god Poseidon, the god of the sea. Plato describes Atlantis as a utopia, a place of beauty, balance, and order. The island was rich in resources, its land fertile, its people skilled in architecture, agriculture, and warfare. They had built concentric rings of land and water, a design so advanced, many modern architects still wonder how such a city could have existed. They used orichalcum, a mysterious metal that glowed like fire. They had palaces, harbors, and bridges, all carved with purpose. Atlantis, as Plato described it, was not just a city, it was an ideal. But then came the fall. Over time, the Atlanteans grew greedy and arrogant. Their souls, once noble, were now filled with desire for power and control. They began to conquer other lands, including parts of Europe and Africa, and as their pride grew, the gods became angry. So, as punishment, the island was struck by earthquakes and floods. In just one night and day, Atlantis sank into the sea, leaving no trace behind. Now, here's where things get interesting. Plato wrote the story as if it were a real event. He said it had been passed down from Egyptian priests to a man named Solon, a Greek lawmaker and philosopher, who then told it to his relative Critias, who passed it on through generations. This long line of storytelling is what eventually landed in Plato's hands, or so he claimed. But was Plato telling history, or was he creating a fable to teach a lesson? Many scholars believe Plato invented the story of Atlantis. They argue it was a metaphor, a tale meant to warn us about the dangers of pride, greed, and the misuse of power. In this view, Atlantis represents a failed utopia, a place that had everything but lost everything because of its own actions. Just like Plato's other famous work, The Republic, which talks about the ideal city, Atlantis could have been his way of showing what happens when that ideal goes wrong. But others aren't set so sure. Some believe Plato was retelling a much older story, one that may have been based on a real event, perhaps a natural disaster like a volcanic eruption or a memory of a sunken island passed through generations. The eruption of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around 1600 BCE was one such catastrophe. It destroyed much of the island and caused massive tsunamis. Could this have been the real Atlantis? Could a memory of that disaster have survived in the stories told by Egyptian priests, eventually making its way to Greece? Others point to the possibility that Plato mixed real events with fictional elements, that he took the story of a city destroyed by natural forces and added his own details, the golden walls, the god kings, the shining metals. After all, Plato was a philosopher, not a historian. His goal wasn't just to report the past, it was to teach, to make people think, to use stories as a mirror for society. Still, some researchers take the story more literally. They believe Atlantis may have truly existed, and that it was lost somewhere in the vast Atlantic Ocean. Some even claim to have found evidence, strange structures on the ocean floor, underwater roads, or odd satellite images of circular formations beneath the sea. While most scientists remain skeptical, the fascination continues. So, where does this leave us? We're left with a story more than 2,000 years old, a story told by one of the greatest minds of all time. And yet, we still don't know if it's fact or fiction. We don't even know if Plato intended us to believe it. He never returned to the tale in his later works. He never confirmed or denied its truth. He left it open, like a question waiting to be answered. In ancient times, storytelling was more than entertainment. It was how people passed knowledge, values, and warnings to future generations. Atlantis, whether real or imagined, serves as one such message, a tale of greatness and downfall, of wisdom and warning. Even today, the idea of a lost civilization captures our imagination. We dream of sunken cities and forgotten worlds. We wonder what secrets lie beneath the oceans. We ask ourselves, could a place so advanced, so beautiful, really have existed long before our history books begin? Maybe Atlantis is not just a place. Maybe it's a symbol of everything we could become and everything we could lose, a symbol of both hope and caution. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's what Plato wanted all along. When we listen to the story of Atlantis, we're not just hearing about a city that may have drowned. We're hearing about ourselves, our desires, our mistakes, our dreams. Atlantis is a mirror, one that reflects the best and worst in us. Whether it was a real civilization, a warning from the past, or simply a myth made to make us think, the story of Atlantis continues to flow through our minds like the ocean itself, vast, deep, and full of mystery. And in the gentle waves of time, it whispers to us still, be wise, be humble, build well, because even the greatest civilizations can sink. Plato's account of Atlantis has captured the imagination of the world for over 2,000 years. His descriptions are the only known source for the tale, and what he wrote has become the foundation for every myth, theory, and search for this lost civilization. His story begins with grandeur, a powerful empire with unmatched wealth, advanced knowledge, and a society said to have been blessed by the gods themselves. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato speaks of Atlantis not as fantasy, but as historical recollection passed down through generations, originating from ancient Egyptian priests and brought to Greece by Solon, the wise Athenian statesman. Solon, according to the dialogue, was told of a massive island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the Strait of Gibraltar, that had once been the seat of a mighty civilization. Plato's Atlantis was enormous. He wrote that the island was larger than Libya and Asia combined, stretching across the Atlantic Ocean in a place where land now seems to be only water. It was a powerful kingdom with influence that spread across many other lands, including parts of Europe and Africa. The rulers of Atlantis controlled not just the island itself, but also extended their reach over nearby territories and distant lands, forming a vast empire that rivaled any known to history at the time. The society of Atlantis was highly organized. The island was divided into concentric circles of land and water, linked together by bridges and tunnels. The central circle housed the royal palace and a grand temple dedicated to Poseidon, the god of the sea, who was believed to be the original guardian of Atlantis. The temple was said to be vast and magnificent, covered in silver with pinnacles of gold surrounded by statues of gold and sacred animals. The Atlanteans honored their gods through rituals, processions, and feasts held in this sacred center, and the entire city was arranged in harmony with the natural and divine order. Atlantis had resources in abundance. The land produced everything needed, from food to precious metals. Plato describes the island as overflowing with timber, rare stones, and a mysterious metal known as orichalcum, which shone with a red, fiery glow. This metal was second only to gold in value, and the walls of the city gleamed with it. The canals between the rings of land made for perfect navigation, and ships could pass easily between different parts of the city. The Atlanteans built docks and shipyards, and their naval power became unmatched. Their fleet could sail across oceans, their armies could move swiftly, and their engineers had mastered the elements in ways that seemed almost supernatural. The people of Atlantis were said to be both noble and wise. Their ancestors were part divine, descended from Poseidon himself, and this divine spark, according to Plato, gave them a natural harmony and goodness that allowed them to thrive. For generations they lived in peace, honoring virtue, justice, and moderation. They respected the gods and did not pursue power for its own sake. They were self-sufficient, pious, and ruled with wisdom. There was no greed, no corruption, and their society reflected the order of the universe itself. But over time, this divine nature began to fade. As the generations passed, and the divine blood was diluted by human weakness, the Atlanteans began to change. They lost their sense of balance. They became obsessed with wealth, pleasure, and domination. Their cities grew more extravagant, their desires more dangerous, and their actions more prideful. They began to believe that they were entitled to rule all of the world, not through harmony but through conquest. They raised great armies and set out to take lands far beyond their borders. Their navy became a tool of war, and their ideals turned into tools of control. Plato writes that this moral decay did not go unnoticed. The gods, especially Zeus, the ruler of Olympus, looked down upon Atlantis and saw that its people had strayed too far from their divine nature. They had been given every blessing, land, wealth, wisdom, and yet they had allowed themselves to become corrupted. The balance between the divine and the human had been broken. Their arrogance grew, and they sought to conquer even the sacred land of Athens, which stood as a beacon of virtue and order. In the story, it is Athens that stands against Atlantis. The ancient Athenians, still pure and virtuous, resisted the might of the Atlantean Empire. Though outnumbered and outpowered, the Athenians fought with courage and righteousness, and in the end they prevailed. Atlantis was defeated, not by a greater army, but by a people who still lived in balance with wisdom and virtue. It was after this defeat that the punishment came. According to Plato, the destruction of Atlantis was sudden and total, in a single day and night of misfortune. The island was struck by earthquakes and floods. The land shook, the seas roared, and the entire civilization was swallowed by the ocean. No trace remained. The once great empire vanished beneath the waves, buried forever in the depths of the sea. And so the story ends, not with a battle but with a reminder that even the greatest civilizations can fall when they lose their way. Plato never wrote about Atlantis again. After these dialogues, he never explained if the story was entirely true or simply a philosophical tale. Some scholars believe he intended it as a warning, a story designed to show how power can corrupt, how wealth can blind, and how the greatest danger to a society is forgetting the values it was built upon. Others think he may have been drawing from older stories, ancient memories passed down through generations about a real place that was destroyed in a natural disaster. Whatever the truth, Plato's account remains the most detailed and lasting version of the Atlantis myth. The way he described Atlantis, its architecture, its wealth, its people, has shaped our imagination for centuries. People have searched for it beneath the oceans, in the deserts, under ice, and in the distant corners of the world. Some believe the story points to a real event, perhaps the destruction of the island of Thera, where a volcano erupted and caused devastation throughout the ancient world. Others see Atlantis as entirely symbolic, a mirror held up to our own societies, showing us what we risk becoming when we lose touch with virtue, balance, and humility. Still, there is something hauntingly beautiful in the way Plato describes the downfall. It is not dramatic or filled with anger. It is quiet, almost calm, a reminder that nature itself has the final word, that even the most powerful empires are still subject to the laws of the universe. The waves do not care for gold or kings. The earth moves without concern for temples or armies. What was once a gleaming city can become nothing more than whispers beneath the sea. Perhaps that is why the story of Atlantis continues to live. It is not just the tale of a lost island. It is a reflection of us, our desires, our achievements, and our flaws. Plato painted a picture of a perfect civilization, and then showed how easily it could be lost. And maybe deep down we recognize that same potential in our own world, the rise, the pride, and the possibility of a fall. As the waves rolled over Atlantis, as the temples crumbled and the lights were extinguished, the story was not lost. It lived on in words, carried across time by Plato, then by others, until it reached us. Now, when we imagine Atlantis, we don't just see ruins beneath the sea. We see a dream of what could be built and what could be destroyed, of what humans are capable of at their best and at their worst. Atlantis may never be found. It may never have existed, but the lesson it carries through Plato's careful and poetic words remains as powerful today as it was over 2,000 years ago. Greatness without humility leads to ruin. Power without wisdom leads to collapse. A civilization that forgets its roots cannot stand forever. And so we are left with silence, the silence of the deep sea, and the silence of a story that ends not in triumph, but in quiet loss. Atlantis sank, and with it a piece of human imagination that still drifts beneath the surface, waiting, wondering, whispering to those who will listen. Was it ever real, or was it always meant to be a mirror? Maybe that is the mystery, and maybe that is enough. Over 2,000 years ago, a story emerged from the writings of one of history's most influential philosophers, a tale of a magnificent civilization, so grand and powerful that its very name would become a symbol of mystery, wonder, and loss. That civilization was Atlantis. Plato's vivid description of the island nation, with its glittering temples, vast armies, and astonishing wealth, has stirred imaginations across generations. But the question that has haunted minds ever since is a simple one. Was Atlantis a real civilization? Or was it merely a symbol, carefully crafted to deliver a deeper message about human nature? Plato introduced the world to Atlantis through two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. He presented the story as one passed down from Egyptian priests to the Athenian statesman Solon, and from Solon to Plato's own relatives. Within these dialogues, Plato speaks of an advanced civilization that existed over 9,000 years before his time. The Atlanteans, he claimed, were initially noble, virtuous, and in harmony with the gods, but over time they grew corrupt, greedy, and arrogant, and for their sins the gods punished them by submerging their entire civilization beneath the sea in a single day and night. To many modern readers, this story feels less like a historical report and more like a moral parable. It's told not in the style of a historian recounting dates and events, but as a philosophical narrative intended to make readers think. And this is where many scholars begin to lean toward a symbolic interpretation. They argue that Plato did not mean for us to believe Atlantis literally existed. Instead, he used it as a device, a metaphor for what happens when a society loses its way. According to this view, Atlantis was never meant to be found on a map. It was meant to be found in the mirror. Plato, as a philosopher, was deeply concerned with questions of justice, virtue, and the ideal society. In his famous work, The Republic, he lays out his vision for a perfectly balanced city-state, one governed by reason, discipline, and wisdom. But in Timaeus and Critias, he presents Atlantis as a cautionary tale, a once ideal civilization that fell because it forgot these very principles. By placing Atlantis in contrast with ancient Athens, which he describes as brave, just, and virtuous, Plato creates a moral lesson about the dangers of pride, excess, and moral decay. Many scholars point out that the structure of Plato's narrative supports this interpretation. In Critias, he describes Atlantis with striking detail: the size of the island, the layout of its concentric rings, the glittering walls covered in precious metals, the temples, the military, the technology. But the dialogue abruptly ends, unfinished, just as the story nears its conclusion. Some believe this abrupt stop was intentional, a philosophical technique to leave the lesson incomplete, inviting the reader to reflect on what went wrong. Others believe Plato simply abandoned the project. But in either case, it reinforces the idea that the story was never about history. It was about ideas. There's also the fact that Plato is the only ancient source who ever mentioned Atlantis. No other known Greek historian, writer, or philosopher before him had spoken of it. For a civilization supposedly so vast and powerful, its absence in all other ancient texts is striking. If Atlantis had once controlled much of Europe and Africa, surely someone else would have mentioned it. But there is silence. Only Plato speaks its name. This lack of corroborating evidence is one of the primary reasons scholars reject Atlantis as a real place. Historians rely on multiple sources to confirm events from the past. When only a single account exists, especially one embedded within a philosophical dialogue, it raises doubts. Many researchers believe Plato simply invented Atlantis as an example. Just as fables use animals to teach moral lessons, Plato may have used Atlantis to teach political and ethical ones. But if Atlantis was a metaphor, what exactly was it a metaphor for? For some, it represents hubris, the ancient Greek word for excessive pride or arrogance. The Atlanteans, once in harmony with the divine, lost their balance. They began to believe they were superior, invincible, untouchable. They desired more land, more power, more control, and in doing so they lost their moral compass. This fall from grace reflects a common theme in Greek literature and mythology. Time and again, characters who challenge the gods or believe themselves greater than nature suffer tragic consequences. Atlantis fits this pattern perfectly. It is a civilization that rose too high, too fast, and was brought down by its own ambitions. Others interpret Atlantis as a critique of real-world powers in Plato's time. Athens had just emerged from decades of conflict, including the Peloponnesian War with Sparta. The city had seen its own highs and lows, its own moments of greatness and destruction. Some scholars believe Plato was using Atlantis to indirectly criticize imperial ambitions, wealth obsession, or political corruption that he observed in his own society. By creating a fictional empire that collapses under the weight of its own greed, he could safely make a broader point about human civilization without directly attacking anyone. There's also the spiritual interpretation. Plato often wrote about the soul, how it can be elevated through wisdom or corrupted through desire. Atlantis in this light becomes a reflection of the human soul. It begins pure, with a divine spark, but becomes tainted by worldly attachments. Its destruction is not just physical but moral. This idea aligns with much of Plato's philosophy, that true fulfillment comes not from material success, but from living a life of balance and inner harmony. Despite all this, not everyone is convinced that Atlantis was entirely symbolic. A small but persistent group of researchers believes Plato may have based his story on real events, perhaps an actual civilization that suffered a cataclysmic disaster long ago. Some point to the eruption of the volcano on the island of Thera, now known as Santorini. which destroyed much of the Minoan civilization around 1600 BCE. This event caused massive tsunamis and earthquakes across the Mediterranean, wiping out cities and reshaping coastlines. Could a memory of this disaster have survived, passed down through generations, finally reaching Plato in a transformed form? Others look to the Atlantic Ocean itself. Ancient maps and legends speak of lands beyond the known world, and some researchers have suggested that sunken formations off the coasts of Spain, the Caribbean, or even Antarctica might be remnants of a forgotten culture. While most mainstream scientists dismiss these claims as speculation, they continue to capture public imagination. Still, even those who seek a historical Atlantis often acknowledge the symbolic power of the story. Whether or not Atlantis existed in the physical world, it exists in the human mind. It stands as a symbol of lost wisdom, forgotten glory, and the delicate balance between power and virtue. It reminds us that greatness is not guaranteed, that civilizations, like individuals, must remain humble, grounded, and aware of their limits. In the end, Plato's genius may lie in the very uncertainty he created. He gave us just enough detail to make Atlantis feel real, but left enough ambiguity to make it timeless. He painted a world so vivid that we can see it in our minds, yet left no evidence for our hands to touch. That tension between belief and doubt, between history and myth, is what keeps the story alive. Somewhere, in the depths of our collective memory, Atlantis drifts like a dream. We picture its shining towers, its vast canals, its people full of promise and potential, and we remember how it ended, not with war or conquest, but with silence, a lesson submerged, waiting to be heard again. Plato may never have intended us to search for Atlantis with ships and sonar. Perhaps he meant for us to search for it in ourselves, to ask how we live, what we value, and what we might lose if we forget the lessons of balance, humility, and wisdom. In that sense, Atlantis is not a place on a map. It is a question, a warning, and perhaps a hope. As we look out across the vast oceans of time, wondering if Atlantis truly sank beneath the waves or never rose at all, we're reminded that the most powerful stories are the ones that ask more than they answer. Atlantis remains one of those stories forever floating between truth and tale, between the world we know and the world we can only imagine. And maybe that is exactly where it belongs. The story of Atlantis has lived in human imagination for over 2,000 years, whispered through ancient texts, echoed in modern documentaries, and woven into countless theories. When Plato first described the island civilization that vanished beneath the waves, he sparked not just curiosity but an endless search. Since then, scholars, adventurers, mystics, and scientists alike have wondered, where could Atlantis have actually been? If Plato's story was based on truth, even a fragment of truth, then surely there must be some trace of it left behind. A ruined city buried in the sea, a sunken island chain, or perhaps a memory preserved in the bones of forgotten lands. The search for Atlantis is not only a journey across space, but one through time, through geology, mythology, and the very human need to find meaning in mystery. One of the most frequently proposed locations is the Greek island of Santorini, known in ancient times as Thera. Perched in the Aegean Sea, Santorini is what remains of a massive volcanic eruption that occurred around 1600 BCE, one of the most powerful in recorded history. The eruption destroyed the center of the island, creating the stunning caldera we see today, and sent shockwaves throughout the Mediterranean. The Minoan civilization, flourishing on the nearby island of Crete, was deeply affected by this disaster. Archaeological evidence shows widespread destruction, ash layers, tsunamis, and even signs of social collapse. Many researchers believe this event could have inspired Plato's tale. Though the Minoans were not quite as Plato described, they lacked concentric ring cities and divine kings. They were highly advanced for their time. They had paved roads, running water, and intricate art. Their sudden decline, closely tied to Thera's eruption, left a gap in the historical record that Plato may have filled with imagination and philosophy. The location is close enough to have been known to Greek thinkers, yet distant enough in time to be reimagined as an ancient legend passed down from priest to philosopher. The Santorini theory, though not a perfect match, offers a rare blend of natural disaster and advanced culture that mirrors the spirit of Atlantis. Beyond the Mediterranean, eyes have turned westward to the Atlantic Ocean itself. Plato claimed that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now know as the Strait of Gibraltar. Just past this point lies the vast, mysterious Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a submerged mountain range stretching thousands of miles beneath the ocean. And near it, the Azores Islands rise like the tips of buried mountains, scattered far off the coast of Portugal. Some theorists suggest that the Azores could be remnants of a once great landmass, partially submerged by shifting tectonic plates. Underwater sonar scans have revealed unusual shapes on the sea floor, rectangular formations, straight lines, and features that some interpret as roads or walls. To mainstream scientists, these are most often dismissed as natural geological patterns, but for those chasing the ghost of Atlantis, they are clues. The Azores theory appeals to those who take Plato's account more literally. The idea that a great landmass once stood in the Atlantic and was later lost to cataclysm fits the narrative. Some even believe the volcanic activity in the region could have caused sudden collapses or land shifts, making the destruction of a large island plausible. Others point to sea level changes over thousands of years, suggesting that what is now submerged may once have been dry land. Still, the theory struggles with the lack of concrete archaeological evidence. No artifacts, ruins, or cultural traces have been found that directly link any known people to a lost empire resembling Atlantis. Yet the idea endures, drawing the curious and the hopeful to the deep waters and lonely islands of the mid-Atlantic. Even further afield lies a theory that pushes the boundaries of traditional thinking, the idea that Atlantis may have once existed in Antarctica. At first glance, this sounds impossible. The continent today is a frozen wasteland, covered in ice sheets miles thick, with no cities, no temples, and no known ancient human presence. But proponents of the Antarctica theory believe that this was not always the case. They argue that a shift in Earth's crust, a phenomenon known as crustal displacement, may have moved Antarctica from a temperate region to its current position at the South Pole. If such a shift happened quickly, it could have frozen an entire civilization under layers of ice. The idea is that before the shift, Antarctica may have supported a thriving culture, one with advanced knowledge, perhaps even more advanced than our own ancient civilizations. This theory often draws on speculative interpretations of ancient maps. Some point to the Piri-Reis map, a 16th century chart that appears to show parts of the Antarctic coastline free of ice. Others cite supposed alignments between lost cities and Earth's magnetic field. The claims are bold and largely rejected by mainstream science, but the imagery is powerful, a lost world buried under eternal ice, waiting to be discovered. Antarctica's isolation and mystery make it a perfect canvas for the imagination. Its inaccessibility preserves the unknown, and its sheer scale makes us wonder what might lie beneath. For those who see Atlantis not just as a city but as a symbol of lost knowledge, Antarctica becomes a frozen library, a place where human history might be waiting in silence. Still others look west again, but this time toward warmer waters. The Caribbean Sea and the coasts of Central and South America have been home to advanced civilizations long before European contact. Some theorists suggest that the shallow waters of the Caribbean hide remnants of a lost Atlantean culture. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar scans in the early 2000s revealed what appeared to be underwater stone formations, large blocks arranged in patterns that some believed could be artificial. The media buzzed with excitement, calling it a possible underwater city, but further exploration proved difficult. The depth, visibility, and logistics of deep-sea diving in the region made proper excavation nearly impossible. The Cuban government, too, placed limits on access, and the story faded from mainstream attention. Still, for many, the Caribbean offers a compelling mix of mystery and possibility. The region is prone to earthquakes and hurricanes, and legends of sunken lands persist in local folklore. Ancient cultures like the Maya and Olmec achieved remarkable feats of architecture and astronomy. Why not consider the possibility that they were the descendants of an even older people, perhaps once linked to Atlantis? Near the coast of Spain, another theory rises, one that has gained traction in recent decades. The Doñana National Park in southern Spain, near the mouth of the Guadalquivir River, was once the site of a vast inland sea. Satellite imagery and ground surveys have revealed circular and rectangular structures buried beneath the marshes. Some researchers believe these may be the remains of an ancient port city, one that could have inspired the Atlantis myth. The area matches some of Plato's descriptions. It lies near the Pillars of Heracles. It was once a vibrant trading region, and the land was prone to floods. Supporters of this theory suggest that the real Atlantis may have been a powerful Iberian culture lost to natural disasters and forgotten over time. While the evidence is intriguing, it remains circumstantial. Without inscriptions, artifacts, or more direct proof, the theory remains one possibility among many. The search for Atlantis has become a global puzzle, a quest that spans continents and oceans. Each theory carries its own set of clues, contradictions, and mysteries. Some are grounded in geological science, others in ancient legend, and many in a blend of both. For some, Atlantis is in the Mediterranean, a distorted memory of real disasters like the Thur eruption. For others, it lies in the Atlantic, hidden beneath waves or transformed by time. A few believe it is buried under the ice, while others see it in the Caribbean sun. In every case, the appeal is the same. The idea that somewhere, somehow, a piece of forgotten human history remains, waiting to be uncovered. But perhaps the true location of Atlantis is not physical at all. Perhaps it resides in the imagination. A map not of land but of longing. A symbol of a golden age we feel we once had, or could still have again. In this sense, every proposed location tells us more about ourselves than it does about ancient geography. The Greeks looked to the west, seeing mystery beyond the sea. Later thinkers looked to the unknown poles, imagining civilizations beneath the ice. Each version of Atlantis reflects a hope that there is more to history than we've been told, more to discover, more to understand. The earth itself is full of forgotten places. Entire cities have been swallowed by jungles, deserts, oceans. Civilizations rise and fall, and time covers them with silence. But Atlantis endures not because of what we've found, but because of what we haven't. The lack of proof becomes part of the allure. It invites us to look deeper, to question what we think we know, and to believe that the greatest stories may still be buried beneath our feet. As technology improves, as satellites scan every inch of the planet, and submarines dive to unimaginable depths, we may yet uncover something unexpected, a structure, a carving, a ruin that changes everything, or we may not. We may search forever without finding a single stone from Atlantis, and still the story will remain. Because Atlantis is more than a place. It is a feeling of wonder, of curiosity, of reaching for something just beyond the horizon. Whether it lies in Greece, the Atlantic, Antarctica, or nowhere at all, Atlantis calls to something ancient within us. A desire to remember what was lost, to learn from the past, and to imagine a world where beauty, wisdom, and power once lived in perfect harmony, if only for a moment. For centuries, the idea of advanced ancient civilizations has fascinated humanity. From the towering pyramids of Egypt to the mysterious stone heads of Easter Island, questions continue to arise about how ancient people created such remarkable structures and whether they had access to knowledge or technology far ahead of their time. Among these wonders, one legend stands out above all. Atlantis, the lost civilization described by Plato, has become a symbol not just of a fallen empire but of a society so advanced it challenges everything we think we know about the past. Over time, Atlantis has become more than a city buried beneath the sea. It has become a canvas for speculation, where ancient myths and modern imagination collide. And at the heart of that speculation is a question many dare to ask. Did the people of Atlantis possess advanced technology? Some modern interpretations of the Atlantis story go far beyond Plato's original writings. While Plato described the Atlanteans as possessing great engineering skill and incredible architecture, later retellings and alternative theories suggest something more. There are stories, some from esoteric traditions, others from modern conspiracy circles that claim the people of Atlantis had access to electricity, flying machines, powerful energy sources, or even global communication systems. These ideas are not supported by historical records or archaeological evidence, but they persist in books, documentaries, and countless online forums. According to these legends, Atlantis may not have just been a city of stone and water, but a society that unlocks secrets we are only beginning to understand today. One of the most commonly repeated ideas is that the Atlanteans had a form of wireless energy. Some claim that they used crystal-based energy systems, tapping into the Earth's natural power grid, or even harnessing the energy of the sun and stars. These ideas draw loose inspiration from Plato's mention of orichalcum, a glowing red metal said to have been mined on the island and used throughout its buildings. Orichalcum, though likely fictional or symbolic, has been interpreted by some as a material capable of conducting energy. The image is a compelling one, a golden civilization, its towers glowing with soft light powered by unknown forces, its streets illuminated without fire or oil. It fits neatly into our desire to believe that the past may have once been the future. Another frequent claim involves flying ships or aerial vehicles. Some theorists believe the Atlanteans had the power of flight, not just through hot air or gliders, but with true anti-gravity or advanced propulsion systems. These claims are often connected to ancient alien theories, suggesting that the knowledge of flight came from beings beyond Earth. In some retellings, Atlantis was not just a land-based kingdom but a center of interstellar knowledge and communication. These stories borrow imagery from sacred texts, strange carvings, and unexplained artifacts, building a narrative that mixes myth, science fiction, and selective interpretation of historical data. There is no solid evidence to support such claims, but they continue to inspire movies, books, and the dreams of those who feel that modern science has not yet revealed the full truth of our past. The idea that ancient civilizations may have been more advanced than we assume is not new. Even in traditional archaeology, there are mysteries that remain unresolved. The precision of the Great Pyramid of Giza, the astronomical alignment of Stonehenge, the scale of the temples at Baalbek. All of these raise questions about the tools, knowledge, and motivation of our ancestors. How were massive stones moved and placed with such accuracy? How did ancient cultures predict celestial events with astonishing precision? How did societies with no written language or known technology build monuments that still challenge our understanding today? These questions open the door to speculation. Some believe that there were civilizations before recorded history that reached high levels of technological development and were then destroyed by global catastrophes. In this view, Atlantis was not unique, but one of many cultures that rose and fell in cycles, each time leaving behind fragments of knowledge, misunderstood by the civilizations that came after. The idea of a lost golden age runs through many myths around the world, from the Vedic texts of ancient India, which speak of flying machines called vimanas, to the legends of the Hopi people, which tell of advanced societies wiped out by floods or fire. These stories share a common thread that humanity once knew more than we do now, and lost it. The tension between lost knowledge and science fiction is a fine one. On one side, history gives us real, tangible accomplishments, agriculture, metallurgy, navigation, and architecture, that show human ingenuity evolving over time. On the other side, speculative ideas suggest that our ancestors had access to technologies we've yet to rediscover. Some of these ideas are fueled by genuine gaps in our understanding. Others are encouraged by a desire to see the past as something more magical, more advanced, or more exciting than what textbooks describe. Critics of ancient technology theories point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So far, there is no physical proof of electrical grids in ancient cities, no machines recovered from ruins, no writings that describe engines, batteries, or lasers, while natural materials like obsidian or polished stone could be used to focus light or heat. This is far from evidence of advanced energy systems. The burden of proof, historians argue, lies with those who make the claims. Without hard data, these stories remain in the realm of myth and imagination. Yet, some discoveries continue to provoke curiosity. The Antikythera mechanism, for instance, is an ancient Greek device believed to be over 2,000 years old, found in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece. It is a complex assembly of gears used to predict celestial movements. Its complexity stunned researchers, as it resembled a mechanical computer, something no one expected from that time period. The existence of such a device shows that ancient people had far more sophisticated understanding of astronomy and mechanics than previously believed. Though it is not evidence of Atlantis or flying ships, it reminds us that we must be cautious not to underestimate ancient minds. What often drives the belief in ancient technology is not just curiosity, but a sense of humility, an awareness that history as we know it is incomplete. So much of the human story has been lost to time. Wars, natural disasters, and the slow decay of fragile materials mean that many civilizations left behind no trace. For every city we uncover, there may be a dozen more beneath jungle, desert, or ocean, and so the imagination fills the gaps. If a few broken tools and crumbling temples can survive 5,000 years, what wonders might have been lost completely? The human mind seeks connection. It wants to believe that the stories passed down through generations of sky gods, magical machines, golden ages, are echoes of real events. And perhaps in some way they are, not necessarily in the literal sense of flying cars or beam weapons, but in the idea that knowledge can be lost and rediscovered and lost again. That history is not a straight line but a wave rising and falling with time. Atlantis becomes a symbol of this pattern. Whether it had flying ships or glowing crystals is beside the point. The real message lies in the idea that wisdom and power once gained can vanish in an instant. A civilization, no matter how advanced, is never immune to collapse. Arrogance, disconnection from nature, and imbalance within society can lead even the brightest cultures into ruin. If Atlantis had technology beyond our own, then it only makes its fall more tragic and more meaningful. It reminds us that progress must be matched with responsibility. That science without wisdom is not enough. As modern science pushes forward, exploring space, unlocking the genome, building artificial intelligence, we find ourselves facing similar questions. How much is too much? How far is too far? And what happens when a society moves faster than its own understanding? These are the same questions Plato raised with his story of Atlantis. The tale may be thousands of years old, but its lesson feels more relevant than ever. In the end, whether Atlantis had electricity or aircraft, or whether it was simply a metaphor, the myth speaks to something deep within us. It challenges us to look at our own civilization and ask, are we truly as advanced as we believe, or are we too repeating a cycle we no longer recognize? The lost technologies of ancient times may not lie in stone machines or forgotten energy systems. They may lie in the wisdom we've chosen to ignore, the wisdom of living in balance with the earth, with each other, and with ourselves. Perhaps that is the real lost knowledge, and perhaps, like Atlantis, it is waiting to be rediscovered, not in the sea or the sky, but within us. Long before satellites circled our planet, and archaeologists uncovered ancient ruins stone by stone, humans passed down their history through stories, tales carved into clay tablets, whispered around fires and carried from one generation to the next. These stories, wrapped in myth and memory, often tell of golden ages and sudden cataclysms. Among them, few themes appear as often and as widely as the tale of a great flood, a rising sea, or a city swallowed by the earth. The legend of Atlantis, as described by Plato, is perhaps the most famous example in the Western world. But when we step back and look globally, we find that Atlantis is not alone. Civilizations across continents, many with no contact with one another, share remarkably similar stories of destruction, flood, and lost lands. This widespread storytelling raises a fascinating question. Could all of these myths be echoes of a single ancient disaster, a global memory passed down through culture and time? The story of Noah's Ark is one of the most well-known flood myths. Found in the Hebrew Bible, it tells of a time when humanity had become corrupt, and as punishment, a divine flood was sent to cleanse the earth. Noah, a righteous man, was warned by God and instructed to build an ark, a massive wooden vessel to save himself, his family, and two of every kind of animal. The rain poured for 40 days and nights. The waters rose, swallowing cities and mountains. When the flood finally receded, Noah's Ark came to rest on a mountain, and from there life began again. To many in the West, this story is part of religious tradition, but its parallels with other ancient flood tales are striking. Thousands of years before the Bible was compiled, the ancient Sumerians of Mesopotamia told a similar story. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest surviving works of literature, the character Rutunipishtim is warned by the gods of an upcoming flood, meant to destroy mankind. He builds a great boat, fills it with animals, family, and supplies, and survives a deluge that covers the earth. After the waters retreat, he sends out birds to find dry land, and his boat eventually comes to rest on a mountain. The similarities to the story of Noah are undeniable: different names, different gods, but the same core tale. And it doesn't stop there. In Hindu tradition, there is the story of Manu, a wise man who is warned of an impending flood by a talking fish. An incarnation of the god Vishnu, Manu builds a large boat, takes with him the 7 sages and seeds of all life, and survives the great flood that wipes out the world. Again, when the waters subside, life begins anew. The story is not identical, but the structure is familiar: a divine warning, a boat, a flood, and a rebirth. Further east in China, ancient texts speak of devastating floods that shaped civilization. One famous account tells of Yu the Great, a legendary figure who controlled the floods by digging channels and managing waterways, eventually founding the Xie dynasty. While not a tale of global destruction like Noah's, it still places water as a force that reshapes societies and marks a turning point in history. Indigenous cultures also carry these themes. The Hopi people of North America tell of several worlds that have existed before ours, each one destroyed when its inhabitants lost their way. One of these worlds was ended by a great flood, with only a few people surviving by climbing into the hollow stalks of reeds or being taken to safety by deities. In Mesoamerica, the Aztecs believed in cycles of creation and destruction, one of which ended in a massive flood. In South America, the Andean people told of Viracocha, the creator god who flooded the world to destroy giants and start anew with a better race of humans. Even in the Pacific Islands, flood stories emerge. In Polynesian traditions, there are tales of lands that once existed above water, now gone beneath the waves. The Maori of New Zealand speak of large parts of land disappearing beneath the sea, leaving only isolated islands. In the myths of the Aboriginal Australians, the Dreamtime includes stories of massive floods that changed the landscape and separated once connected lands. Africa, too, holds its flood legends. In West Africa, the Yoruba people speak of water spirits and tales of a time when too much water once covered the earth. In the East, some Ethiopian traditions include stories of floods that wiped out previous generations, echoing the biblical accounts familiar to the region through early Christianity. All these stories, scattered across the globe, seem to echo each other, not just in the presence of a flood, but in the structure of the narrative. There is often a moral or spiritual reason for the destruction. Humanity has become corrupt, arrogant, or disconnected from the divine. There is usually a chosen figure or small group who survives, either through warning, wisdom, or divine favor. They survive the disaster in a vessel, be it a boat, a mountain cave, or a hollow reed. And after the flood, there is renewal. Life begins again, often with a promise, a new law, or a change in the natural order. It raises the question, are these stories purely myth, or could they represent cultural memories of real events? Scientists and historians have long debated the origins of flood myths. Some suggest they may be based on local floods, disasters that affected a particular region so deeply that they were remembered for generations, then mythologized. River cultures, like those in Mesopotamia or the Indus Valley, were especially vulnerable to flooding. A major overflow of the Tigris or Euphrates could easily destroy entire cities. It's not hard to imagine survivors interpreting such events as divine punishment or world-ending calamities, especially without modern science to explain them. Others point to larger events. At the end of the last ice age, around 11,000 years ago, the planet underwent dramatic climate shifts. Ice caps melted, and sea levels rose by hundreds of feet over thousands of years. Massive amounts of coastal land were submerged, turning once inhabited areas into ocean floors. The Black Sea deluge hypothesis, for example, suggests that a sudden rise in the Black Sea's water level around 7,500 years ago may have inspired the flood legends of the Near East. Coastal communities may have watched helplessly as the sea claimed their homes, and such trauma could have shaped their cultural memory for millennia. Even more speculative theories connect these global flood stories to the fall of hypothetical advanced civilizations like Atlantis. If such a civilization did exist near coastlines, perhaps in the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, or elsewhere, then rising seas could have submerged it almost entirely, leaving behind only myths. Proponents argue that the similarity of flood stories around the world is evidence of a shared human memory, a disaster so large it touched every continent, echoing through language, religion, and myth. Of course, critics caution against over-interpreting similarities. They argue that flood stories could simply be a natural outcome of living near water. Most early civilizations formed near rivers and coastlines, and floods were a common part of life. Over time, these events would naturally become part of folklore. The human mind, seeking meaning in chaos, creates stories that explain destruction and survival. But still, the global consistency is difficult to ignore. There's another possibility, one that bridges science and story. Some researchers believe that humans carry deep cultural memories, stories that persist for thousands of years, passed orally from generation to generation, across continents. These stories may evolve, shift, and adapt to local cultures, but their core structure remains. If a significant global event did occur, like a sudden rise in sea level or a meteor strike causing climate disruption, it could have left a psychological imprint on humanity. Our ancestors, lacking the tools to fully understand the event, turned to myth, and those myths became the flood legends we know today. The idea of a global memory is not limited to floods. Stories of sunken cities appear in many cultures. The legend of Kumari Kandam in Tamil tradition tells of a lost land south of India, now beneath the Indian Ocean. In Japan, Yonaguni Monument, a submerged rock formation off the coast, has sparked debate over whether it could be the remains of an ancient city. In the Atlantic, stories persist of High Brasil, a phantom island said to appear once every 7 years off the coast of Ireland. In West Africa, there are tales of cities swallowed by the desert or lost beneath rivers. In the Andes, Lake Titicaca is believed to be the site of an ancient sunken city, linked to the god Viracocha. The stories are endless, and each one contributes to a larger human narrative that great civilizations once existed, were lost, and left only whispers behind. Whether these tales are memories of real events or metaphors for spiritual truths, they matter. They connect us across time and culture. They remind us that our ancestors faced the same questions we do today. Why do disasters happen? How should we live? What lessons should we carry forward? Atlantis fits perfectly into this global puzzle. It is not just a Greek legend, but part of a wider pattern, a shared human longing to understand the past, to explain the unknown, and to remember what we have lost. When Plato described Atlantis as a civilization that rose in glory and fell in pride, he may have been echoing a much older story, one told in different tongues and scattered across the earth. In that sense, the legend of Atlantis is not alone. It is part of a family of stories, ancient, mysterious, and deeply human. The flood myths, the sunken cities, the lost lands, all serve as reminders of nature's power, of civilization's fragility, and of the wisdom that can grow from tragedy. Whether they are literal histories or symbolic parables, they continue to guide us, warning and inspiring, urging us to look both backward and forward with humility. Perhaps the seas still hold answers. Perhaps the ruins of these lost worlds lie buried beneath sand, stone, or ocean floor waiting to be found. Or perhaps they live only in our collective memory, in the dreams of poets and the stories of elders. But one thing is certain, humanity has always remembered the flood, and in that memory we see not just water and loss, but rebirth. For more than 2 millennia, the legend of Atlantis has lived in the imaginations of scholars, dreamers, and explorers. Plato's ancient tale of a once great civilization that vanished beneath the waves continues to inspire curiosity, debate, and relentless searching. Even today, in a world mapped by satellites and explored by submarines, people still dedicate their lives to finding Atlantis. They scan the ocean floor, sift through ancient texts, and analyze satellite imagery in hopes of uncovering one of the greatest mysteries of human history. What fuels this enduring fascination? Is it the hope of rewriting history, the thrill of discovery, or the quiet belief that somewhere, beneath the seas, lies a forgotten chapter of humanity? The modern search for Atlantis began to intensify in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, during a time when archaeology was beginning to emerge as a scientific discipline. As ruins were uncovered in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Mediterranean, people began to wonder if Troy could be found after centuries of doubt. Why not Atlantis? Early explorers and thinkers such as Ignatius Donnelly popularized the idea that Atlantis was a real place, possibly the source of all ancient civilizations. In his book, Atlantis, The Antediluvian World, Donnelly argued that Atlantis had influenced Egyptian, Mesoamerican, and even Indian cultures. Though his ideas were largely speculative and not supported by evidence, they struck a chord with the public imagination and laid the foundation for countless expeditions that would follow. Underwater exploration, still in its infancy in the early 20th century, gained momentum after World War II. Advances in diving equipment, sonar technology, and oceanography allowed researchers to begin mapping the ocean floor in greater detail. One of the first major areas of interest was the Caribbean, particularly the waters off the coast of Bimini and the Bahamas. In 1968, divers discovered what became known as the Bimini Road, a formation of large limestone blocks aligned in a seemingly artificial manner. To some, this appeared to be a sunken road or seawall, possibly built by the people of Atlantis. The discovery attracted media attention and sparked a surge of amateur interest in underwater archaeology. Researchers and spiritual seekers alike began visiting the site, convinced that the lost city was nearby. Despite its fame, most geologists today believe the Bimini Road is a natural formation, shaped by erosion and underwater currents over thousands of years. But the discovery served an important purpose. It rekindled public interest in Atlantis and introduced the idea that underwater structures could still be hiding secrets. From that point on, modern explorers began looking more seriously at the ocean floor, often focusing on areas mentioned in Plato's writings beyond the Pillars of Heracles, or what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. The Atlantic Ocean became a focal point for many of these searches. With the introduction of side-scan sonar and deep-sea submersibles, vast regions of the ocean floor were slowly being revealed. Researchers began identifying strange shapes, rectangles, ridges, and circular patterns buried beneath layers of silt and rock. Some believed these to be the remains of sunken cities or temples. One expedition even claimed to have found large geometric structures near the Azores, potentially matching Plato's description of concentric rings of land and water. But without physical artifacts or definitive proof, these claims remained speculative, often dismissed by mainstream science as coincidences or misinterpretations. Satellite imagery added a new dimension to the search. As satellite technology advanced, so too did the ability to observe the planet's surface in extraordinary detail. From the deserts of Africa to the icy expanse of Antarctica, researchers began using high-resolution images to spot patterns invisible from the ground. Some turned their attention to the ocean floor, using digital tools to enhance shadows and detect anomalies beneath the waves. In recent decades, several unusual formations have been observed off the coasts of Europe, the Americas, and even near Antarctica. Some images show what appear to be grid-like patterns or buried structures, raising questions about whether ancient cities, possibly Atlantis, could lie beneath the oceans, obscured by sand, coral, or sediment. One of the more publicized examples came from Google Earth imagery, where a large rectangular shape with grid-like lines appeared off the coast of northwest Africa. The image sparked speculation that it could be the ruins of a sunken city, perhaps even Atlantis itself. But Google later clarified that the patterns were caused by sonar mapping errors from boats dragging echo-sounding equipment along the seafloor. Still, the idea that such technology could one day uncover real ruins beneath the ocean captured the public's imagination. It demonstrated how even a single image, however flawed, can reignite interest in a mystery that refuses to die. Beyond the ocean, other researchers have turned their attention to inland locations. Some believe that Plato's story may have been mistranslated or misunderstood, and that Atlantis was not in the ocean at all, but buried beneath mud and marsh. In southern Spain, the Doñana National Park has drawn attention for its circular formations and marshland topography. Satellite scans and ground-penetrating radar have revealed shapes that some believe match Plato's descriptions. Several documentaries have been made about the site, showcasing aerial footage and computer reconstructions of what Atlantis might have looked like. While most academics remain skeptical, the site continues to be studied, with new data slowly emerging. Further afield, some have suggested the Andes Mountains of South America, the deserts of Africa, or even the ice-covered plains of Antarctica as possible locations for Atlantis. These theories often rely on reinterpretations of ancient maps, alternative chronologies, or the belief that Earth's geography has changed dramatically over time. Though considered fringe by mainstream academia, these ideas reflect a deeper hunger, the desire to believe that ancient history holds secrets still waiting to be discovered. And in a world where so much has already been explored, the idea of an undiscovered civilization offers a rare sense of wonder. So why do people keep searching for Atlantis, even after centuries without proof? Part of the answer lies in human nature. We are a species driven by curiosity. We build telescopes to peer into distant galaxies, submarines to descend into the ocean's depths, and algorithms to decode our own DNA. The search for Atlantis fits this same pattern. It's not just about finding a lost city, it's about discovering something bigger than ourselves. It represents the possibility that history is more complex than we think, that civilization is older than we've been taught, and that greatness can be lost as easily as it is gained. There's also a psychological dimension. Atlantis represents an ideal, a civilization that once achieved balance, beauty, and power, only to fall because of its own pride. In that way, it serves as both a dream and a warning. The dream is of a society that reached incredible heights, offering hope that such greatness is possible. The warning is of how easily it can be destroyed when hubris overtakes wisdom. In a world facing climate change, political unrest, and technological uncertainty, Atlantis speaks to the fears and hopes of modern life. It reminds us that no civilization is immune to collapse, and that the lessons of the past must not be forgotten. For many explorers, both professional and amateur, the hunt for Atlantis is not about definitive answers, but the journey itself, the process of researching ancient texts, diving into unexplored waters, analyzing strange sonar readings. It becomes a form of discovery regardless of the outcome. And occasionally, these searches do lead to real findings. Entire sunken cities have been uncovered off the coasts of India, Egypt, and Japan. Though none are Atlantis, their discoveries prove that lost cities are more than myth. They are real, and they can be found. Such discoveries fuel hope. If these places were once dismissed as legend and are now documented fact, then why not Atlantis? Even skeptics admit that the ocean holds many secrets. According to marine scientists, more than 80% of the ocean remains unexplored. That's a staggering number when one considers the potential for archaeological sites, shipwrecks, or even civilizations that may lie buried beneath centuries of sediment. Technological advances in robotics, autonomous underwater vehicles, and high-resolution mapping are improving our ability to scan and interpret the seabed. As costs decrease and access expands, the possibility of finding something unexpected becomes increasingly real. Some expeditions are now being funded not by governments or universities, but by private investors and technology entrepreneurs. They bring with them new tools, fresh perspectives, and the resources to explore regions once out of reach. Crowdsourced research projects, open source data, and citizen science initiatives are also playing a growing role. The mystery of Atlantis has become a global effort, one where the lines between professional explorer and passionate enthusiast continue to blur. In the end, whether Atlantis is ever found or not may matter less than the fact that the search continues. It's a symbol of human potential, a mirror reflecting both our achievements and our flaws. It challenges us to ask hard questions about our past, to remain humble about what we think we know, and to keep looking not just for lost cities but for the wisdom they represent. In a world often defined by limits, Atlantis offers the possibility of more. So the sonar pulses into the deep, the satellites scan the blue void, the maps are redrawn, and the data is sifted through again and again. Each new image, each strange shape on the ocean floor, brings a flicker of hope, maybe this time, maybe here, maybe just beyond the reach of what we can see. Something waits, a pillar, a wall, a fragment of a forgotten world. The water is deep, and history is long. But the search continues because in the quiet heart of every explorer, Atlantis is not just a lost city. It is the reason to keep going. Over the centuries, the myth of Atlantis has evolved from a mysterious tale in two of Plato's dialogues to one of the most iconic legends in the world. Though scholars still debate whether Atlantis was a real place, a philosophical metaphor, or a creative invention, the world beyond academia has embraced the legend with open arms. In fact, Atlantis may be more alive today in stories and screens than it ever was in ancient texts. From books to movies, from animated adventures to televised documentaries, the story of Atlantis has been reshaped and reimagined for every generation. Its enduring appeal lies not only in its mystery but in what it represents, a dream of a lost utopia, a civilization more advanced and more enlightened than our own, swallowed by time yet never forgotten. The first time many people hear about Atlantis isn't in a philosophy class or a history book. Instead, it's through cartoons, films, or adventure novels. Children might first encounter Atlantis in animated movies, where it is often portrayed as a magical underwater kingdom filled with glowing crystals, advanced technology, and ancient wisdom. One of the most memorable depictions comes from Disney's Atlantis, The Lost Empire, released in 2001. In this film, Atlantis is not only real but thriving beneath the sea, protected by ancient power sources and hidden knowledge. The story follows a group of explorers who discover the city and learn that it is still inhabited. This version of Atlantis captures many of the elements that people love about the legend. The idea of a highly advanced, peaceful civilization that holds secrets long lost to humanity. The visuals are stunning, the mystery is deep, and the emotional weight of rediscovery gives the story a timeless quality. For many, this film cements Atlantis as a place of wonder and forgotten greatness. But Disney is far from the only entertainment giant to tap into the Atlantis myth. Atlantis has appeared in comic books, science fiction novels, and even superhero stories. In the DC Comics universe, Atlantis is home to Aquaman, the king of the seas. His underwater kingdom is a blend of ancient architecture and futuristic design, protected by a powerful army and filled with marine creatures. In these stories, Atlantis is not just a city, it's a central part of global balance, a force of nature that protects the world from threats both human and supernatural. This depiction, though fantastical, echoes the original idea of Atlantis as a powerful and influential force, one that once dominated its neighbors before being humbled by disaster. Beyond fiction, Atlantis has also found a home in modern science and exploration narratives. Television channels such as National Geographic and the Discovery Channel have produced countless documentaries exploring the question of whether Atlantis could have existed. These programs often combine real-world science with speculative theories, examining underwater formations, ancient maps, and geological data. While they rarely reach definitive conclusions, they fuel public imagination. Viewers are drawn into the mystery, captivated by the possibility that a sunken world might still be waiting to be found. The line between myth and history becomes blurred, and for an hour or two it's possible to believe that Atlantis is more than just a story. Atlantis has also inspired numerous novels, from classic literature to modern fantasy. Jules Verne hinted at Atlantean themes in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where Captain Nemo's submarine discovers lost underwater ruins. In the 20th century, authors began to weave Atlantis into tales of ancient aliens, time travel, and even alternate dimensions. Some writers portrayed Atlantis as the birthplace of human civilization, a mother culture that spread its knowledge across the world before vanishing. Others used Atlantis as a cautionary tale, a place that reached too far, grew too proud, and paid the ultimate price. In both cases, the myth serves a powerful purpose. It allows authors to explore big ideas about technology, morality, and the cycles of history, all wrapped in the mystery of a lost world. Even video games have embraced Atlantis. Titles across multiple platforms have allowed players to dive into ancient ruins, unlock the secrets of Atlantean artifacts, and even battle mythological sea creatures. These interactive experiences give people a chance to explore Atlantis for themselves, to walk its streets and uncover its secrets firsthand. Whether it's in role-playing adventures or underwater puzzle games, Atlantis continues to be reimagined in ways that blend history with fantasy. But why does Atlantis continue to capture our imagination so deeply? Part of the reason is emotional. Atlantis is not just a story about a place, it's a story about loss, about something beautiful and powerful that vanished. It taps into a universal human experience, the idea that there was once something better, something purer that has been forgotten or destroyed. This longing for a lost paradise can be found in many cultures and religions: the Garden of Eden, the Golden Age, the land of milk and honey. Atlantis fits right into this tradition. It is the dream of a time when humanity lived in harmony with itself and with nature, when wisdom and peace reigned, and when technology served not to divide us, but to uplift us. Atlantis also appeals to our sense of wonder. In a world where so much has been discovered, the idea that something as grand as an entire civilization could still be hidden, it reminds us that there are still mysteries in the world, still questions we haven't answered. Atlantis represents the ultimate hidden treasure, not just in terms of wealth or ruins, but in knowledge. The idea that there might be a place, or was a place, where human potential reached extraordinary heights before falling back into darkness gives us both inspiration and warning. It makes us ask, could we reach those heights again? And if we did, would we survive it? There's also a spiritual aspect. In many interpretations, Atlantis was not just advanced in technology, but also in spirituality. Its people were said to possess wisdom, intuition, and energy powers far beyond our own. This concept has been embraced by various New Age movements, who see Atlantis as a source of ancient wisdom that can still guide humanity today. Books, lectures, and meditations about Atlantean knowledge are surprisingly common, and many people feel a personal connection to the myth, as if they are remembering something they once knew. Whether or not one believes in such things, it shows how deeply the idea of Atlantis has penetrated not just our stories but our sense of identity. In many ways, Atlantis has become a mirror for our hopes and fears. When we are hopeful, we see Atlantis as a promise, a reminder that humanity can achieve greatness. When we are afraid, we see it as a warning of how easily greatness can be lost. Its story shifts with the times, adapting to the concerns of each new generation. In the Cold War era, Atlantis was often portrayed as a lost power destroyed by its own weapons. In the environmental age, it is seen as a civilization that ignored nature's warnings. In a world of digital overload, Atlantis is imagined as a place of calm wisdom, where people lived in harmony with their world and with each other. Popular culture has also played a role in keeping the legend alive by constantly reinventing it. Atlantis can be a city in the clouds, a kingdom beneath the waves, or a lost continent teeming with mystery. It can be alien, magical, or deeply human. It can be the cradle of civilization or a forgotten corner of the world. This flexibility is part of its power. Atlantis can be whatever we need it to be. It can comfort, challenge, or inspire. And because it never quite fits into any one box, it continues to live on, not as a fixed story but as an evolving myth. The myth of Atlantis has also sparked real exploration. Inspired by books and documentaries, divers and researchers have gone to extraordinary lengths to search for clues. Expeditions have scoured the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, and even the polar ice caps. Every few years a new discovery is announced. Unusual structures on the ocean floor, ancient ruins in unlikely places, or unexplained artifacts that challenge the historical timeline. These findings may not prove Atlantis existed, but they show how powerful the story has become. It drives people to act, to explore, to dig deeper, not just into the Earth but into history and human potential. Even as technology progresses, the legend of Atlantis refuses to fade. In fact, the more we learn about the ancient world, the more we realize how much we still don't know. Lost cities have been found in jungles, deserts, and beneath the sea. Civilizations once thought to be myths, like Troy, have turned out to be real. The boundary between legend and reality grows thinner with each discovery, and so Atlantis remains suspended in that space between what was and what could be. In literature, in film, in video games, and in spiritual thought, Atlantis continues to live, not just as a place, but as an idea. It's the idea that somewhere, somehow, humanity once touched something extraordinary, that we once lived in a state of balance and brilliance, and that it's possible to do so again, whether or not we ever find a single stone from Atlantis. The myth has already given us something valuable. It has reminded us to keep looking, to keep dreaming, and to never stop believing that there is more to the world than meets the eye. Atlantis is more than a lost city. It is a timeless myth, a symbol of potential, a warning of pride and a spark for imagination. It exists wherever we tell its story, on pages, on screens, and in the minds of those who still believe that magic, wisdom, and wonder may lie just beneath the surface of the sea. For over 2,000 years, the story of Atlantis has drifted between fact and fiction, between academic debate and public fascination. First introduced by the Greek philosopher Plato, the lost civilization of Atlantis has inspired archaeologists, historians, conspiracy theorists, and dreamers alike. Some see it as a real place that vanished beneath the sea. Others view it as a metaphor or philosophical parable. But as the legend has gained popularity in books, films, and modern culture, the divide between scientific reasoning and pseudo-scientific speculation has only grown wider. This divide raises deeper questions, not just about the truth of Atlantis, but about how humans seek to understand the past, and why we are so drawn to stories of lost worlds. Within the academic and scientific community, the consensus has long been that Atlantis, as described by Plato, was likely a fictional or allegorical creation. Historians often point out that Plato used Atlantis to illustrate a political and moral lesson. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, the story of Atlantis serves as a contrast to ancient Athens, where Athens represented virtue, wisdom, and moderation. Atlantis represented excess, arrogance, and decline. When the Atlanteans strayed from their original purity, the gods punished them by destroying their land in a single day and night. According to this interpretation, Atlantis was never meant to be taken literally. It was a symbol, Scholars supporting this view argue that Plato's writings were full of allegories and that he used fictional narratives to provoke philosophical thought rather than to document historical events. Further supporting this view, scientists note that no credible archaeological evidence has ever been found to support the existence of Atlantis as a global superpower with advanced technology. If a civilization of that scale really did exist and collapsed in such a dramatic fashion, we would expect to find some trace of it: ruins, artifacts, written records, or oral traditions in neighboring cultures. But despite centuries of exploration and countless claims, no definitive evidence has emerged. In geology, too, there is little support for the idea of a vast landmass sinking into the sea overnight. While tectonic shifts and underwater earthquakes can cause catastrophic damage, the kind of sudden disappearance described in Plato's account doesn't align with what we know about how continents and islands behave. To most scientists, the literal interpretation of Atlantis doesn't hold up against the weight of modern evidence. Yet outside the halls of academia, the story continues to thrive, and in some circles it's taken very seriously. Among those who believe Atlantis was real, there are a wide variety of theories. Some suggest that the city existed on the island of Santorini, where the ancient Minoan civilization was devastated by a massive volcanic eruption. Others point to the Caribbean, the Azores, or even Antarctica as possible sites. And then there are more fringe theories, those that claim Atlantis was the cradle of all ancient civilizations, home to alien technologies, or inhabited by spiritually enlightened beings. These ideas often fall into the realm of pseudoscience, where speculation is not backed by rigorous evidence or peer-reviewed research, but they persist, in large part because they are compelling, imaginative, and emotionally satisfying. Conspiracy theories around Atlantis often begin with the idea that mainstream science is either unwilling or unable to acknowledge the truth. Some believers argue that institutions such as universities, governments, or secret societies are hiding evidence to maintain control over historical narratives. According to this view, discoveries that could prove the existence of Atlantis have been buried, suppressed, or ridiculed. These claims rarely include concrete proof, but they appeal to a common feeling: the idea that there is more to history than we've been told. In a world full of mysteries, it's not hard to believe that something extraordinary might have been forgotten, or even erased. One of the reasons pseudoscientific theories gain traction is because they often blend pieces of real science with imaginative leaps. A diver finds an unusual rock formation underwater. It becomes the foundation for an entire theory about lost cities. An ancient map shows a landmass in an unexpected place. It becomes evidence of a forgotten continent. Small anomalies are stitched together to form a grand narrative, often bypassing the slow, methodical process that scientific research requires. The internet has amplified this process, allowing theories to spread rapidly, often without scrutiny. Videos and blogs promise to reveal hidden truths, and because they are entertaining and emotionally resonant, they are often more widely consumed than dry academic papers. Despite their flaws, these pseudoscientific theories strike a chord with many people. They offer a sense of wonder, a feeling that the world is still full of secrets, and in an age where so much seems known and mapped, that feeling is precious. Atlantis, in this context, becomes a canvas onto which people project their desires, fears, and dreams. It represents the possibility that the ancient world was more advanced than we realize, that our ancestors knew things we have since forgotten, and that somewhere, perhaps beneath the ocean, lie answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask. The tension between scientific skepticism and pseudoscientific belief creates a fascinating cultural divide. On one side are the researchers who demand evidence, replication, and peer review. On the other side are the believers who prioritize intuition, personal experience, and alternative histories. Often, the two sides speak entirely different languages. To a scientist, a claim without data is meaningless. To a believer, the absence of evidence is not a problem, it's a challenge, a puzzle, or even a sign of suppression. And between these two poles lies the average person, curious and open-minded, trying to make sense of a complex story told in many voices. Some scientists have tried to bridge this gap, engaging with popular theories not to endorse them, but to understand why they persist. They recognize that people are not simply irrational, they are curious. The allure of Atlantis is not just about whether it existed, it's about what it represents. It's about the possibility of rediscovering something beautiful, something ancient, something that once held the answers to our deepest questions. In that sense, Atlantis isn't just a historical mystery, it's a psychological and emotional one as well. It speaks to a part of us that longs for connection with the past, that wants to believe in golden ages and lost wisdom. Of course, not all pseudoscientific theories are harmless. Some feed into larger worldviews that promote misinformation, distrust in science, or even dangerous ideologies. When Atlantis is tied to racial purity theories, ancient alien supremacy, or ideas of cultural superiority, the myth can be weaponized. This is why it's important to examine these stories critically, not to dismiss them outright, but to understand the motivations behind them. Myths are powerful. They shape the way we see the world, and when used responsibly, they can inspire exploration and wonder. But when misused, they can distort reality and fuel division. So why does Atlantis continue to divide opinions after all these years? One reason is that it sits right at the intersection of myth and reality, fact and fantasy. It is just believable enough to make us wonder. The descriptions Plato gave were detailed and specific. The tale includes dates, locations, and architecture. It reads like history, even though it may have been intended as philosophy. That ambiguity leaves the door open. It allows people to interpret the story in many ways, some grounded in evidence, others in imagination. Another reason for the ongoing debate is emotional. Atlantis offers hope to those who feel disillusioned with modern life. It paints a picture of a civilization that achieved harmony, balance, and knowledge, qualities that feel increasingly rare. To believe in Atlantis is, in a way, to believe that humanity is capable of something better, that somewhere in our distant past we lived closer to the ideals we now strive for. Whether true or not, that idea is deeply comforting. Ultimately, the debate over Atlantis may never be resolved, and maybe it doesn't need to be. The legend has already fulfilled its purpose, not just in sparking imagination, but in challenging us to think, to question, and to search. It invites us to explore the boundaries between what we know and what we believe, between hard data and human longing, between the limits of history and the vastness of myth. The story of Atlantis reminds us that science and myth are not enemies. They are different tools for understanding the world. Science seeks facts, tests theories, and demands proof. Myth explores meaning, emotion, and experience. When the two work together, when curiosity is guided by reason, and reason is enriched by imagination, we get closer to a fuller understanding of who we are and where we come from. And so the legend continues. Scientists will keep exploring, diving, and analyzing. Believers will keep dreaming, theorizing, and searching. And the rest of us will keep listening, wondering if just beyond the horizon, beneath the waves, or buried in forgotten texts, there still lies a secret waiting to be found. Atlantis divides us, yes, but it also unites us in the most human of ways, the desire to know more, to imagine deeply, and to hold on to the mystery just a little longer. For thousands of years, the legend of Atlantis has lived in the human imagination, part history, part dream, and part warning. From Plato's original account to modern-day documentaries and movies, it continues to inspire countless theories, debates, and explorations. As we come to the end of our journey through this enduring myth, one question still lingers in the air like mist over the ocean. Was Atlantis ever real? Could fragments of its story be rooted in truth? Or is it entirely a product of philosophical fiction? These questions are not just about a city lost to the waves. They are about who we are as a species, what we hope for, what we fear, and what we long to rediscover. When Plato wrote of Atlantis over 2,000 years ago, He described it with vivid precision. A powerful civilization that existed 9,000 years before his time, located beyond the Pillars of Heracles. The Atlanteans had harnessed immense resources, mastered architecture, governed wisely for a time, and lived in a harmonious society. Yet they grew arrogant. Corruption and greed seeped into their hearts, and as a result the gods sent great floods and earthquakes to wipe them from existence in a single day and night. For Plato, this story was a warning, a lesson about the rise and fall of human civilization, the danger of hubris, and the balance between power and virtue. Yet something about the tale continues to pull at us. It has a ring of familiarity, as though it echoes some deeper memory, a collective intuition that such a place might have existed. Could parts of Plato's story be based on truth? Historians have often noted that myths, no matter how fantastical, often grow from seeds of real events. It's possible that Plato, or those who inspired his writings, heard stories from Egypt or the ancient Mediterranean about great floods, lost cities, or vanished cultures. These stories could have morphed over time, filtered through the lens of imagination and philosophy, until they became the tale we now call Atlantis. Throughout history, civilizations have risen and fallen, many lost to natural disasters, war, or time itself. Akrotiri, the Minoan city on the island of Santorini, was buried beneath volcanic ash in a massive eruption that shook the ancient world. The similarities between that event and Plato's description are striking. Advanced urban planning, colorful artwork, complex trade systems, all lost in a sudden cataclysm. Perhaps Plato knew of such a disaster and adapted it into his narrative. Perhaps other, now forgotten cities along coastlines, drowned by rising seas or destroyed by earthquakes, helped shape the myth. The idea that part of the Atlantis story could be based on real geological events is not unreasonable. In fact, it's very likely. The Earth itself remembers long after humans have forgotten. But even if no physical ruins are ever found, even if Atlantis is never discovered beneath the sea or in some remote desert, the myth still holds power. It's not just about whether the city was real, it's about what it represents to us. At its core, Atlantis is a story of potential, human potential. It is a vision of what we might become both in our greatness and in our failure. The Atlanteans were masters of their environment. They built canals, temples, and machines. They thrived, but in forgetting humility, they doomed themselves. The rise and fall of Atlantis mirrors the arc of so many real civilizations, from the Babylonians to the Romans, the Maya to the Khmer. In this way, Atlantis is not just a lost city. It is a symbol of the delicate balance between creation and destruction, between progress and pride. Why do we continue to be drawn to the idea of lost worlds? The answer lies deep in the human heart. We are explorers by nature, seekers of the unknown. From the moment we stood upright and looked toward the horizon, we have searched for new lands, for knowledge, for meaning. The story of Atlantis taps into that ancient drive. It suggests that something incredible once existed, something just out of reach, and that it might still be found. It invites us to dream not just of the past, but of the possibility that the world still holds mysteries waiting to be uncovered. In a world that often feels fully mapped, digitized, and explained, Atlantis whispers that wonder is not dead. It reminds us that there may yet be secrets hidden beneath the waves, locked away in forgotten scrolls, or buried beneath layers of time. The search for Atlantis then becomes a metaphor for a deeper quest, the quest for lost wisdom. Many who chase the myth are not just looking for stone ruins or ancient artifacts. They are looking for something more intangible. The idea that humanity once lived in harmony with nature, with each other, and with higher principles. Atlantis represents a golden age, not just of technology or wealth, but of understanding. And whether that age ever existed in physical form may be less important than the fact that we still yearn for it. In that sense, Atlantis is less of a place and more of a mirror, a reflection of our highest hopes and deepest regrets. And so the myth continues to evolve. In the age of satellites, sonar mapping, and deep-sea exploration, we are still chasing shadows beneath the ocean. New discoveries fuel old dreams. Unusual formations on the ocean floor, strange ancient maps, and unexplained ruins only add to the mystery. Even when science dismisses a claim, the hope remains. Not because people are stubborn or irrational, but because Atlantis lives in a part of us that science doesn't always reach. The part that dreams. The part that believes in beauty, in lost knowledge, in the idea that what once was can be found again. Our fascination with Atlantis also reflects something deeply personal, the feeling of having lost something ourselves, whether it's a sense of community, peace, balance, or purpose. Many people in the modern world feel that something essential has slipped away. Atlantis becomes the embodiment of that loss. It gives shape to the ache we can't quite explain. It comforts us by suggesting that others, long ago, had what we now miss. And perhaps, if we search hard enough, we might reclaim it. In the end, whether Atlantis was a real civilization or a symbolic tale matters less than the journey it has taken us on. It has challenged scholars, inspired artists, and awakened generations of dreamers. It has reminded us that history is not just a record of what happened, but also a reflection of what we value, what we fear, and what we hope to become. Atlantis teaches us that even in destruction, there is memory, even in myth, there is truth, and even in stories that may never be proven, there is the power to shape our future. So we return once more to the ocean. The waves move endlessly, hiding and revealing, carrying whispers from the past. Somewhere in those depths, whether in physical ruins or in the folds of our imagination, Atlantis still exists. Not as a city of gold or a kingdom of crystal, but as a symbol of all that we could achieve and all that we must protect, a reminder that greatness is fragile and that wisdom must guide power. Atlantis endures because we need it to, because the idea of something lost and worth finding gives meaning to the human experience. And maybe, just maybe, the story of Atlantis isn't about a place we lost long ago. Maybe it's about something we're still building, something we can create if we listen to the lessons of the past. A better world, balanced and wise, waiting not beneath the sea, but within us.